Hi, in this episode we'll learn about Ember components. Components allow to define your own HTML tags with specific behavior, making it reusable, self-contained, and declarative. Nowadays they are not tags but Ember helpers, but in the future when HTML will have its own components, Ember will gracefully adapt to it. So be sure you're prepared for the future. I set up new files index2.html and the same thing for app2.javascript. So just to remove noise. Also, in SCSS folder, I included bootstrap SCSS, and then in index file, I included it right here. Okay, so let's say we want to create user card, which we could display in different part of application. So write an application template right here. Let's define it. So we want it to be something like this, user card. Okay. To create this component, all we need to do is to create new template. So we create new template and it has to be components/user card. So now here I can define, for example, h1 username and h2 full name. Okay, so let's have a look in the browser. Let's go to this index page, reload it, and you can see here we have username and full name. And that's it, very easy. Okay, one important thing to note is that component must have dash in its name. So for example, if you just had the card like this, it won't work. So there's the limitation that you should be aware of. If now we go to browser and reload the page, it doesn't work. Component, again, I'll repeat, must have dash in its name. Okay, so that works, but not much of a use without dynamic data, right? Components are not backed by models, so they receive information from the outside. You can perceive them as functions with arguments. To use some data, we need to provide this data when we call the function. So in a component's case, we can do it like this. For example, username equals Remchi and full name equals Ramzalek. Okay, so now we can use this properties in our template as we do in any regular template, username and full name. So if we go back to browser, reload the page, and now I'm seeing my own data. Good. In this case, we pass just strings, but we can, as usual, bind objects. So let's define user object. In app.js here, let's define object me, and I will create ember.object.create, and there's going to be username, full name, and about. Okay, now let's define application route and provide this model to application route. So we're going to return me. Okay, very easy. So now application template will have these attributes and we can bind them like this. So instead of quotes, we'll do username. And instead of full name here, we'll do the full name from the model. Let's go to browser, reload the page, and we have absolutely the same result. But now they are actually bound, and we can make sure of it. If we go back here, we'll take this me object and we set username to hi. And you can see that it is changed in the component as well. So components are independent, but the data could still be bound to them. Imagine that this user model could have a lot of attributes. So instead of listing all of them here, we could just pass the model itself and we'll do user equal model. And now here we need just to prepend these two things with model, username, and full name. If we go back to browser, reload, it doesn't work, user of course, and we back to green. Okay, so these are basics of components, and even this can get you pretty far, but that's not all. Each component has its own object, which can be used for customization and event handling. So let's talk first about customizations. So if we inspect element of our component, we'll see that component content wrapped inside of this div element. And we can change it. We can customize this behavior. So for that, we need to define our component. So we'll define user card component, which is Ember component extend. And here inside of this extend, we can customize it. So for example, we want to change div to A. For that, we use tag name and we specify A. If we go back to browser, reload the page, now it's a link. Okay. Another thing that we can do is we can specify class names. For example, card and, I don't know, awesome. Go back, reload the page, inspect this element, and you can see that we have card and awesome class on the A tag. So A tag should have href, right? So we can define attributes as well. So we do attribute binding, but we bind attributes to some values of this component. So we bind it to href. And then we define this href here, for example, http google.com. Attribute bindings. Now if we reload, it points to Google. Okay, that's good. Sometimes you have variables that are named not like attributes. So for example, that could be URL. But we still want to bind this property to the href attribute. And we could do it like such. We'll specify first, we specify the property name and then the attribute name. And it still should work, and it still should point to Google. Also, we can bind classes to make them dynamic. So for example, let's say that we want to add highlight class to this element, but only if isHighlighted property is set to true, and remove it from there if it is set to false. So for that, we can define class name bindings, and we specify that it depends, it binds to isHighlighted property. So if we leave it like this, and for example, go here and define it, isHighlighted to true. So if we have the true value, it will convert the variable name to the snake case with a dash, is dash highlighted. And if it falls, it won't include this class. But what if we want just a highlight class? We can specify it like this, highlight. So this way, if we go back and reload, as we have the true value for isHighlighted, we have the highlight class. And we also can have the else statement right here. So for example, if isHighlighted is false, we want it to be with the class dim. So that's how we do it. So Boolean property, true value, false value. So let's change it to false to make sure that it works. And you can see here, dim. Excellent. So now let's add simple behavior to our component. Let's add toggle button, which shows or hides about information. So we go to index.html file in our component here, and right here we define if show about is true, then we will have button hide details, and of course the details themselves. So we'll have user about. Else we want to have button show details, and let's close it. Okay, something like this. So now we need to define this show about property to our component. So let's go back to app.js, and here I will define show about, and let's make it false by default. So that simply means that we will have button show details. Reload the page and you can see show details. Excellent. And I'm going to delete all of this customization that we did here because we do not need them. Now in index here, let's add actions. So for this button, we'll do action and we call it toggle about block. And actually the same thing, I will copy and paste it into this button here. So when we click on it, we want to toggle this about block from false to true or from true to false. So now here, as we did in controllers, we just define actions and inside of it, toggle about block. It's going to be a function. And here we just toggle property. This helper method is provided to us by Ember, and we specify show about. Easy, right? So we do absolutely the same thing that we did with controllers. Here we defined the button with action, and in the component itself, we defined actions and the event handler. So let's have a look. Reload the page. When I click on show details, I have the details and button is changed to hide details, and I can do it like this. Great. Another feature which could be quite handy is wrapping provided content into some tags. So let's say we want to create bootstrap panels quickly. So what do we want to have we want to have info panel, but not only this, we want to wrap content into this info panel. So for this, we use actually the hash variant. So this is the starting tag of an info panel, and then we need to provide the closing tag for info panel, like this. So how can we implement it? So again, we need, of course, to create this info panel template. So let's do this. Components, info panel. So we'll have something like this. Div with class panel, panel default, then we have div with class panel heading, and we'll have this here, the title, and then we'll have the body, and inside of this body, we actually want to render this content, which is between these two tags, and we do it with a command with a helper yield, like this. So the content that was provided between the open and closing tag of the component will be rendered right here in the place of the yield. Let's have a look. Reload the page. It doesn't work. Components. Let's try it again. And here it is. We have the panel, title, and content that we provided. Now, also, this is quite general title, right? We can provide title. So let's do it like this. Title equals, let's say, something. And now here, instead of title, we'll do title. Go back, reload, and we have something. Great. So now in our applications, we can use this simple component for info panel. So the last thing that I want to talk about is the ability to compose components from other components. So for example, here in our user card, we can use just defined info panel. For example, like this, we will have here the open tag of info panel with a title of user.username. So we bind username attribute to the title. So we can remove this one from here and then just close this info panel. So let's go to browser, reload the page. And here we have the panel for Remchi, my full name, and then we have the show details, and it works as it worked before. Okay, so that's it for components. Time for your small assignment. So here on the books page, extract this books detail into the component and then reuse it on the main page. So if I go to the main page, you can see here that I reused the same component for the books detail. Here I just fetch random book and display it on the main page. And of course, if I, for example, add it to favorites and then go to books, it was The Great Gatsby, right? It's still favorited, okay? Try it out, play with it, and have some fun. Okay, in this episode we got acquainted with Ember components. We learned how to create them, how to pass information to them, how to wrap provided content with them, and how to handle events and how to compose them. Have some practice and you'll love them. Thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next episode.